All right, welcome to Artist Trauma. This fucking the whole period of our lives, it feels like, was the part two and three of the Tin Drum. Um, God, it took us forever to finish this, and I think,
That's partially my fault. I had a lot going on in book world, but
yeah,
I could have done
me
it yes.
too. I had trouble with this book. I think it's a masterpiece. It's a classic. It deserves a Nobel Prize and all that, or you
Of
know,
course.
but it was
It's
also
also
much.
it's also like it's the difference between what my buddy and I talk about between this is Preston and I talk about between capital G great and lower G great. So it's sort of capital G great in that it's very long and imposing somehow, and then each paragraph isn't. It's very dissonant to read because I was intimidated by it. And I don't almost know why because it's very charming as well. It's a very different book in that way.
I think a big part of it is like this is a book that needs to be read in German. The humor of it is just probably lost. Like there were things that almost made me laugh. At least had me like, oh, that's fun and clever. Like, but it
Mhm.
just didn't quite do it for me ever. It was always like, oh, I appreciate that. I see the incongruity. I would be in stitches maybe, but it just never quite hit for me in that way.
I mean, okay, so here's what I loved about the book. Gunter Grass is fantastic at evading interpretation. You're not sitting there like really able to pin down Oscar. I'm sure that some school of thought wants to pin down Oscar. He's a child, he's a psychoanalytic destiny of his father, he's blood or whatever. I don't think any fit very well. He's Oscar. He has his own developmental lines of flight that we can interpret, but I don't think there's a capital I interpretation of this novel other than its ontology. Like we can talk about the way matter changes form and fairy tales come in and out, and that's going to be really fun. But I don't have like a, oh, Oscars really is Jesus. It's like, no, 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 no. He's the play of not being Jesus.
Yeah. It's just it just feels like the wreckage of the Second World War. Um,
Well, yeah, and I mean that's kind of like I texted you something like, "Oh, Oscar is sort of a version of the German spirit." I totally disagree with that, but he is definitely a witness to this time period.
yeah, I mean, for me, what I feel it's so complicated this book, and the thing is about it, like, there's all these different little episodes that have no like plot significance. Basically, like it's a heavily episodic book, but it's like they're constantly being referenced, and it's like you're just drowning in these symbols of like, oh, the eels my mother ate, or the um uh,
Skirts from Grandma.
or the or like the body of Stuntengratter on a man being being hung on a light pole after the Nazis lose, and it's
Right,
like,
or just Jesus in
yeah, just
general.
Jesus, like constantly, like it's like I am Jesus all the all
Ich
the
bin
time.
Jesus.
And it's like you there's so many of these episodes you feel like, okay, well, that was great, that was fun, we'll never come back to that again, except then it like, but then it becomes like the full on like elaboration and recreation in a different scene later.
Well, the penultimate chapter is the Polish dude fever dream of the Poles coming from the earth and rescuing him. And that's like a minor character from like 400, like 200 pages earlier.
Yeah, and it's
I didn't remember at all. Of course, I was like, "Who the fuck is this guy?"
yeah, I only like slightly remember, oh yes, there was that. And I was such a different person when I read that back
When
then.
when we were young, Ray, when we were young.
That's
Um, no,
monster.
I think like to not do violence to the text, but to interpret it. I think of words from like Deleuze and Guattari. I think of like Guattari has this philosophy of the refrain or ritornello, and without worrying about his version of it, it's really just is at play in this book. Things become refrains. And it's kind of alarming how many things could become refrains. If Gunter Grass just wanted to never shut up, he could have written a 40,000 page book. Um, and so it's like there's all these refrains, and as time goes on, other refrains tumble forth. Like, what's the logic here of these
I
refrains?
mean, I mean,
What
it's
is the logic here of
I mean,
it?
there's a couple of things that come to mind of like with the refrains from these past episodes and how they come back eerily. Uh, I mean, that's sort of just life. Like it's like you're always like having to deal with the refrains of your memories. Like you're always in this process of the past experiences modifying your future ones. There's no such thing as an isolated moment. That's
Yeah, but
free of
my
the
life
past.
doesn't have Jesus coming back that much.
Well, yeah,
Okay.
then we
I
can
mean,
talk
okay, wait.
about the particular quality of these.
In one sense, yes, life has these refrains. In second sense, like his refrains are pretty, well, they're not the ones that come back for me.
Yes, like I did not one day on the wharf see a fisherman pull out a horse that was just brimming with eels, just coming out of every orifice of it, and then my mother becoming vomiting horrifically and then dying from eating solely seafood directly afterwards in some quasi causal fashion. That's just not an event that occurs in one's life.
And also, going back to my theme of like evading interpretation, you can't say it's trauma. You can't. Some of them are, but the Jesus one is not. That's like identity. Like it's not that these refrains are all traumatic. Some of them are traumatic, some of them are just cool, some of them are like life. Some of them just have a really neat image that sticks in the craw.
I mean,
Um,
yeah, let's say this is the trauma issue and
oh yeah,
kind
I
of
mean trauma's there obviously. It's
yeah, yeah,
not
no,
I'm just saying it's not it doesn't stitch together every refrain.
yeah. I'm not saying it is, but let's at least look at it through that
Yeah.
lens because like to me there's two aspects of the book that like made me feel more just pulled together in a certain way
Hmm.
was the onion soup or the onion cellar, that whole episode where people go to this little pseudo cafe to just peel onions, not even eat them, just peel onions so they can cry because you can't cry in the post-war world. You can't you can't actually get your feelings out, so they go there to do this, and it's just so childish that particular like description.
But first, it's sort of true. I mean, you watch post World War II cinema, and there's a lot of like stunned Germans around who have trouble processing this horrifying guilt and emotions and all this stuff. Like Wim Wenders and Rainer Werner Fassbinder's films are all about this. So in a certain sense, even though it's very childlike, it is basically true.
Yeah, I know. I think it is true. I mean that's like the weird dual or I don't know, just theme of the book is we have Oscar who refuses to grow up when he's 3 years old, and then when he kind of starts to grow up, he gets to be like I don't know 4.5 feet tall or whatever. Um, just playing on his tin drum persistently, and it's like there's some sense of like here's a child who just refuses to grow up into this absurd and grotesque world around him
Hmm.
and who can't suffer and deal with it in certain ways, although I mean that's the whole ironic detachment of the whole book. And it's just I mean just the characters, like the characters are just such odd creatures, like they're not even
Bebra.
really
Bebra's
human
really
beings.
weird. Bebra. Weird.
Yeah,
Actually, Bebra
yeah.
might bite me more than normal ones.
Yeah, fucking Deborah. I mean, there are some characters who have some kind of neurotic, weird reality, like, well, Oscar obviously, and Bruno, his keeper. Um, they and like the way like he talks is he'll be describing perfectly horrific things in extraordinarily and overly precise detail. That does not capture the emotional reality of what's going on there. But it is capturing like that alienation from the experience.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't think you can talk about this novel without equating some form of alienation with his short stature. Like, I think when I read it, it gives me a certain distance from Oscar. Like, Oscar not growing up never lets me be Oscar. Like, I never felt like when I was reading this book that I could assume the position of the, like, I'm the main character going through the novel, like a normal novel. There is always this weird distance, which might be why it was so hard to finish in a certain sense.
Yeah, there is this
You
weird.
never relate to, yeah, you're never in the first person relating to the main character. I am the main character doing the main character things. He's never letting you do that.
I mean, in a sense, he isn't even doing that to himself because he's constantly switching from the first to the third person.
Exactly.
And and it's such. I mean, this is just one of those like um, just golden examples of the unreliable narrator, where it's like, what's reality? What's not? Is this just insane ramblings? Is
Well,
this
it becomes internal issues, right? You know, sometimes characters call, like when he's on the train near the end and someone's like, "Oh, it didn't happen that way." And it's like, "What? Now we're worried about how it happened?" This is like we haven't been worrying about how this has happened for 500 fucking pages. And now suddenly we're introducing objective reality into the problem. This is making it worse. Right? Like I was so
I mean, it's such
hot.
a. For me, it's like okay. What's so interesting about that unreliable narration is there are things that are just so like, no, this couldn't be that way. Like he's born and he remembers precisely how like his mother or father like promised him a tin drum on his third birthday. No, a newborn does not remember. When he is 3 years old and he falls down the steps and it's like he puts it as he planned to do that and he refused to grow any further. um or like when he starts to be able to grow again, like because it's like possible son, I don't fucking know, throws a stone in the back of his head and he becomes sick and gets hunchbacked and whatever. It's like, okay, is it actually him deciding? Is in this world that the causal refrain of like, no, like he does actually have volitional control over his height, or is it that it's like, no, like this is just like his sort of fake attempt at like trying to deal with the world around him, like him trying to impose like, no, I do have power over
Yeah.
this like weird creature that I am. And there's that, but then you also just have the whole weird like, I can cut glass with my scream. Um, and that's a major plot point in a sense
Like,
because he gives shows in the Second World War to Nazi
yeah.
troops.
Yeah, and then at the end of the novel, he even there's a little transfer of the power onto
Yes,
those who
yes.
get thoroughly orgiastic enough. It's like, well, there is, I mean, isn't there a sort of, okay, so that's one thing. That's one interpretation, I think. And I think it would do violence to the text if you solved the problem. You know, if you said, "Oh, it's one or the other." It's like, no, it's the tension between the
No,
two.
and I agree with that. And
Right, because otherwise it'd be kind of boring and like, you know, it's this crazy guy or whatever. But um also, so that's one layer of tension. Another layer of tension with causality is just how weird matter is in this book. You know, like glass gets cut, eels are weird. Like there's a lot of transference between matter and bodies that's very experimental, and it's not reciprocal, but it seems to have a sort of imagistic logic to it. Like it's sort of satisfying aesthetically. I don't know if there's any deeper logic to it other than just Here's a weird, gross image. It causes other weird things to happen. The end. Or
Yeah, it's there's a weird. I feel like just to sort of describe what's the matter like in this world. It's like it's just sort of rides, or or it's just vaguely gross, but not in a more like in a Gia committee kind of way, not in like or oh, I'm forgetting the artist's name now, but Dubafet. It's like Dubafet if you know him.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The childlike quality of Oscar and his perception robs it of its terror sometimes. It takes away terror and gives it just uncanniness.
Yeah, yeah,
Something like that. But it's
yeah.
very, very specific.
It robs it of it of like you're not. That's one thing that's sort of interesting about modernism is it doesn't really deal in like actual fear, like actual terror. Most it's very seldom it doesn't like do that particular emotional range. Like that's more of like, oh, if you want that, it's like, oh, it's like I don't know, Dracula, like or Frankenstein or something like something like in the haze of romanticism. You get like that kind of emotion of like, oh, my values are in threat, and let me react to try to survive this or something. Um,
Or getting eaten by a wolf or just whatever.
yeah, and it's like, but no, like modernism doesn't have that register of being so concretely threatened. Maybe things are intensely ominous, like
I was going to say that. I think that you're right. I think that like intensely ominous is like a lot of modernistic writing.
yeah,
Even Krasna who's like alive today, but is just following in the modernist trend of experimentation. The one I read from him is just like it's a movement from threatening to ominous, and that's the progression of the novel. But there's never, you never have like in the, in the Balzac. What I love about Balzac is occasionally the real like erupts and just shit hits the fan. And it's like, oh God, I got stabbed. Or someone I planned someone to get an STD, and you're like, what? Like it's intensely just like visceral, and the real erupts. The real kind of gurgles in Gunter Grass. It doesn't
yeah. I
erupt.
mean, like to me, like one of the moments that stands out in particular is I think he's a like a basically a Boy Scout leader, and I forget the exact incidents that led to this, but things don't go well for him as a human being, and he commits suicide. He's found hanging in the cellar, and when Oscar finds this, it's like he's hanging from the cellar, and he's as a counterbalance, he's using like a bag of potatoes, and it's like, and the way it's described of like, you know, how he had simultaneously hung and weighed himself. And it's like, it's like that is just such a. This is in any normal human being's life. They don't deal with that. They don't look at a man. Don't describe a man's suicide in that kind of ironical fashion.
Ironic, but also brilliant because what it did is it unearthed something of the essence of suicide as a measure of your own being. I mean, it does that all at one image. It's like he weighed himself negatively. When you combine the images, I mean, he does that all the time, where you have these two things smashed together that reveal something interpenetratively about the other image, and that's hard to do. Um, and it's also just an image. Like you have it, it's so concretely there. And one thing about the measurement in that passage is that saying measurement somehow made it more concrete. Like it was easier to picture the weight of scales once they said it as an image for me.
yeah, no, it's an excellent piece of writing. It's doing a lot.
But isn't going back to a point you said earlier, where like modernism in literature doesn't deal often. I mean, obviously, it's thousands of books. It probably deals with it somewhere, but in general, with the terrifying, the actually terrifying, like from horror or romanticism or wherever, or Poe, you know. Whereas in music, it's the opposite. You know, you have Xenakis. You'd be amiss to miss to talk about
But
musical modernism without talking about the fact that it's so aggressive to the late ear,
no, I would agree with that.
deeply, deeply terrifying.
No, I'd agree with that. There's something different going on with music. I don't know how that can that works out, but
It is the dissonance, though.
no,
You know,
no, it's there. It's there clearly.
very hard to understand, though, I think, for me. I don't really know why a movement that can have similar values, progress, experimentation, etc., but in the mediums themselves wind up at vastly different experiences.
Yeah, this is something mysterious to me. Um,
Yeah.
but returning to the novel directly, though,
Yeah.
yeah, actually, the point I didn't quite fully explain on the
Yeah, keep going. Sorry.
the onion seller and all that. It's like, and then, well, then his later career, Oscar. There's a desire to like express these feelings, to like actually like cry over like the tragedy of their lives and what's going on, and a and like that's what he actually makes his career off of is like he plays music and people just feel like, oh man, I'm back to being like 3 years old and I just wet myself and oh oh no, the I forget the nursery rhyme, but it's like, oh black butcher, he's going to get me or something like that. And it's like that's just it's like he's making them return to childhood. He's making them sort of break down into that more direct, sincere way of engaging with things. And this is a thing is like most of the characters don't really feel like characters. Like Matsura or Jan Bronsky or Maria, they're very interesting. Like I'm very happy with what he's done, but they feel more like I don't know George Grosz cartoons or something. Like they don't they feel oddly impersonal in the way like Kafka characters feel like not quite there. There's some like oh god, I can't remember the name of the you know the Weber. Like Weber is like more of an individual, but like the rest, not quite.
Well, it's because they're described based on these surreal qualities and situations. Like, think of the trumpet player who's drunk and then, like, gets not drunk. Like, it's the way Gunter Grass writes characters is tying them to a trait. But unlike most writers, where it's like, okay, if I was describing you, like the dash of silver above the eye or whatever, that would be fine. Actually, that might be very Gunter Grassi, but like,
Yeah, kind of
like,
is.
kind of is. But like in general, you know, you get a trait, but then the single traits that people get are so bizarre. I think that adds some distance. I thought Jan was pretty personable. I liked Jan in
Yeah,
some
no,
weird way.
I like Jan Bronsky too.
Jan, yeah, Jan was
Yeah,
great.
yeah, he was but I mean, he's sort of a bit, foppish, a man about town kind of quality. And then the moment he's like at the Polish post office defending it, just an absolute crybaby. Absolutely just shivering with fear, which I'm not judging him. Like I don't know what I would do in that situation. But like it was that was like one of my favorite moments of the entire book was when they're in like the room that they put like the dead and injured soldiers um in the Polish post office, and Oscar, Jan, and the and this dying old man are all playing a game, some game of bridge or whatever, and and the man is literally just dying. He can barely hold up his cards, and Jan is he's completely into it. He's completely not even. He thinks that he's still like playing a game of bridge with like Oscar's mother, who he had was having an affair with, and
In
all
Mazzaroth. Yeah.
Metzera, and it's like that's just it's. I think that that's almost a perfect image of the novel of this playing a children's game, playing a cards game in a way to ignore the horrific reality around you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, how do you talk about World War II and the Holocaust? Like, just no, honestly, like, how do you write a novel covering those years without some askantness? So, like, that playing cards in there is fantastic because, I mean, I think Zizek said something great about this. He said, like, the best things ever written about the Holocaust are comedies because it's too traumatic to just, like, deal with. It's why Schindler's List, while a nice movie, I'm never gonna watch that again. This is horrible. It's just awful. Whereas Gunter Grass, I'm like, no, I'm gonna read this again probably later in life when I have more patience. But like, there's something about not confronting things directly that the text is always doing.
yeah, that's
I mean, even the rape scene. Okay, so the Russians come in, and we know it's coming. The Russians did mass rape of the German people, and he describes it as like giving her the old pumping out, and then she eventually was like, okay, or something. Like it was like, yeah, that's not how that happened at all. Like it was like, I was like, oh God, the Russians are coming. This is going to be really brutal. And then I was like, oh, or not, maybe not. And it is, of course. And then they like
she,
kind of like make her sex, like the sex slave, right? But he describes it as like, well, they took up together in residence, and you're like, yeah, that's really how that happened.
she was just so obliging,
Yeah, she was such a nice lady.
polite hostess.
Polite hostess, and it's like, and so that's another example of that distance. The cards is another example. Um, I mean, where he hits it directly, it's very traumatic. Is the repetition at the end of part one, which we already talked about, which is slightly more direct and still maybe mediated. I'm not sure. I have to reread that part.
I mean that's actually no. I take it back about the. I mean, well, it's best image what I mentioned earlier, but like just that sort of broken repetition of just starting it over and over again. This moment which like so well represents like a loss of innocence, like the destruction of the toy shop.
Of course, like
Um,
literally,
yeah,
in the
and like
most literal sense.
which he gets away with. He gets away with that heavy-handed symbolism here. Um, because, but it's yeah, no, but on your the how do you even deal with the Holocaust? I mean, that's my. I very much am on board with that thing. Like, I just imagine, like, God, what would it actually have been like to have walked off that train and to have seen the things that like they describe seeing? It's like you can't. You just have to reject reality at that point. You can't take it seriously. It's like this is not the life I had before that existed. Where I am now, this is some weird dream, some aberration. I don't know how anyone could process that. And then like, yeah, I don't know, we were like you were in a country where like that happened and actively supported that.
Mhm.
Like I don't know how you process any of that.
Right. I mean, and I think like, okay, so there was a film. called Night and Fog. It's one of the first big documentaries made about the Holocaust. And it's a documentary, but it's made by Rene, Resnais, famous director. And it deals with it directly. And because at that time it was like, no, you fucking people, this happened. But now you watch it and it's unwatchable. It's utterly unwatchable. It's too, I mean, I get anxiety, but then it's not even art. It's like watching a snuff film. And that's important to show people what's real, but it's not aesthetics.
It's
Gunter Grass isn't going to prove to anyone, there's no like simple message. It doesn't work aesthetically.
yeah, as in it's not. I mean, like the collective guilt. That's like a big thing, and like that's something since recurring for Oscar is he's always painting himself either accurately or inaccurately, who knows, as like the cause of the death of kind of most of the people in his life. Of it's like, yeah, it's because of what the sort of things he accused Jan Bronsky of.
Yeah.
Like you got to execute, and Metzeroff, like he handed him the party pin while the Russians were there, and the what happened to Raguna, the little other short person, girlfriend, lover he had.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to add, as don't stop. I'm just adding later in the to fill in some details. Later in the book, he admits to Bebra like the guilt of he calls it a murder when he handed him the pin.
Yeah, and
He,
it's so. What are we to make of that? It's is like we are sort of in this weird quasi reality where it's like it's a fantasy what we're reading, but it's also somehow in an ambiguous fashion informed by real events. I by the way, my whole sort of I guess my sort of theory of it, it's like yeah, like we can't tell reality apart from the fiction. We can't tell the recollection apart from what is being recollected. Like the two things are just going to be in a indecipherable twilight between the two, and it's like that's just the human condition for Grass. And like with the guilt, it's like yeah, it's like that of like, is he guilty? Is he not? No, both. Yes, no.
I mean, yeah, I think Gunter Grass's worldview is that I I sometimes still wonder if by making Oscar short, and I know I'm kind of repeating a thing I said earlier, but I'm going to say it a little differently because we go in different ways of interpretation, and that's great. This thing is super rhizomatic, super open. But in making Oscar short and just weird, no offense, um,
Oh, the midget playing the drums. That's like has a weird obsession with nurses and
no offense. What the fuck am I talking about? Yeah, it breaks glass by screaming. Yeah. Okay, he's the freak, obviously, and it's great.
was plausibly responsible for four murders.
Yeah. Um, and was like a thief. Okay, obviously, I mean a criminal and Jesus maybe. He there's passages where you feel in with Oscar a little, but for the most part, there's the function there is slight distance. And I think that's just like in doing that, it shows the distance that you actually have from other people. Like other people are weird. Like I don't know. Like you read a lot of pop novels and you think like, "Oh yeah, I'm the main character. I'm the hero." And in the Freudian sense where he goes in pop novels, the main character is revealed as our hero, the ego. You know, Indiana Jones,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, yeah. And what makes great literature is that it doesn't do that, obviously, because that's bad, I think. I mean, it's just, it's not bad. It's just, it's like video game logic. You're the main character, you're doing the thing. And I think that function is like so important in this novel that you have that distance and it somehow actually gives you empathy because you empathize with how people are actually weird instead of some sort of fake empathy that you get in pop novels.
Yeah, no,
It's kind of a complicated point. I don't know if I'm right. I mean, I don't know. What do
no,
you
no,
think?
I think you're really onto something here. What I want to say about it is I do. I think earlier you were saying something a little different, but maybe, but
Mhm.
I do sympathize with Oscar in a very big way. Like not quite fully. It's a little hard, but
Right. Not literally, but maybe really.
what I share with Oscar is the feeling of this world we live in is absurd. And there are things that are almost impossible to process. Like, they just like for me, like as a concrete example, it's like I just look. I'm not going to go into details. I'm not going to go into details, but like the things the Trump administration has been doing. It's like this is just a daily reality. This is a fact of what's going on. Like the sort of violations of the rule of law in so many vital ways, so like are undercutting institutions. It's something for me that's hard to process on an emotional level. And even just like taking like a less, this more general example, it's like I remember reading in a Sinclair Lewis novel, like a character is working for a public health official, and and he has a very low opinion of the guy. He's just a jackass in various ways. And at one point, he announced, "Well, I think I'm going to run for Senate now." And there was a moment where he felt where Lewis describes the character as he had still had enough naive respect for politicians that this shocked him. Um, and it's like, and it's like,
Fantastic.
I wish I could have that. I wish I could feel that the
Uh,
people who rule us were competent, like knew what they were doing. Like that would be really nice. I
well,
really
more
wish.
specifically, yes, I agree.
Yeah, and
Kind
it's
of,
like that's a trauma. That's a trauma of like you can't really believe the things going on in the world around you. You have to deal with it with ironic detachment. And I mean, I don't know, the Second World War and
well,
the
no, no, it's not that you have to deal with an ironic detachment. It's much more super egoically terrifying. You have to deal with its ironic detachment, and you must be involved. What are you doing? What is wrong with you? Get involved at the same time. Somehow you have to both become more of an active protester, citizen, whatever, involved in democracy, and not. And that's what I can't. That's the hard part. Is not that you because if it was just like I could become ironically detached, it'd be very simple. I would just say fuck the government. Oh well. But on the other hand, I'm also a part of the world, and it's just totally split. And then in the way that Tin Drum is split. Well, actually, wait. Going back to the novel, is he split in this way?
no, he's not split.
No,
He
he's
admits
not.
to his failed reality.
He's just
Um,
like doing his own thing.
yeah, he's
Well, can
not
I give you?
engaged.
So here's one for me, just really quick, because I want to give my traumatic response too. And the trauma is doubled by the fact that no one cared. During COVID, one of the conspiracy theories was lab leak.
Mhm.
It was like, oh, we don't have evidence, we don't have it. And that was probably the correct structural position to take is I don't know, get your vaccine, whatever. And then like things go back to normal, and then retroactively it was like, oh yeah, the evidence is like totally pointing to this lab leak. And then later, maybe not. And it's just like, and now we don't even those headlines come and go. They're just and you're just like, oh my, I mean, does it matter, or did it only matter in the moment, or what am I supposed to do with this bullshit?
Yeah, that's a the whole COVID response that feels like a horrific cultural trauma, not like the Holocaust, but something like in like a I don't know, maybe a 9/11 territory.
Well,
Um,
it messes with your sense of duration for sure.
yeah, and it's like in a sense, it's never really. it doesn't feel it doesn't feel like we learned anything. It's just we sort of agreed to stop talking about it. Like it doesn't feel like, well, were the government shutdowns? Were that was that really like the right thing to do? I'm not saying they weren't. I'm just saying it's like, well, what would have been the better course? And
And instead
have a
of going
chance
like,
to
well,
get
let's look at the evidence, people are like, shut the fuck up, don't talk about it.
yeah, and it's like, like was the CDC like, well, they sort of wish wash back and forth, and I'm personally very sympathetic with a lot of what the CDC was doing in a lot of ways. I think, in a sense, the big failure of the pandemic is they weren't followed actually more scrupulously their recommendations. Um,
But that's
but it
not
was
even what
also
you're
like
talking.
there were things that are all screwy in the way things were communicated and done. It's like this is just a cultural trauma that like we all have to deal with, and we're never gonna get satisfaction for.
Or we just put under the rug, Ray, and never talk about again.
Yeah. Maybe
That's,
maybe we'll make some jokes and ironic detachment towards it.
I remember reading Ali Smith's book Companion Piece, just really, really quick. And it was the first pandemic novel I read where it was dealing with the pandemic. And the ending of the novel was very brilliant. The woman's dad is in the hospital. I'm going to ruin this. Sorry, everyone.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
no.
only okay. Don't read it.
Yeah.
But it made me cry because all she does is go to the dog park to walk her dad's dog and meet all of his friends that she didn't know about. And I just like burst into tears. Because it's like, yeah, that was what it was like. So I think that in this novel, the similarities to life are that when there's an event, it messes with our sense of time. So in the novel, you have the time of the novel, okay, but you also have running linearly, coexistent, or in dissonant the time of history. And I think that I don't know the answer to this question, but that would be my second read would be how does the timing in the novel relate to the time in history?
Yeah, that's actually one. It's really, yeah, the historical fact, because this is a novel that's simultaneously intensely interested and ignoring history. Of it's like, when like different things are happening, like they are, this is major events of the novels, like the declaration and invasion of Poland, the Russians, and um, things in the post-war world, all that, like all of that is like this is a big deal. It's like Hitler, he's right. Posterum's right there in the drawing room, facing off against Beethoven.
They're both angry.
Yeah, and it's like it's there. It's constantly there, but also it's not really what the book's about. The book's about like, oh yeah, one time like me and the Dusters like tried to steal from a church, or there was a time when the baby Jesus spoke to me, or that time that just the eels. It's just like that's what the book's about in a sense. Like those are the concrete events, but it's like, I mean, even just like the fact of like the bartering that had to go on in the post war period,
Yeah.
because like I don't know, something about how the currency wasn't effective. Like that's sort of something that keeps getting brought up. Like that's a fact of life, and it's like it's an intensely historical novel. It's like bearing the weight of history on every page, but it also is like the Holocaust is never brought up. Hitler, in essence, is never really brought up. It's all sort of seen through the eyes of a child, as it were, of like,
Right. Well, and like think about in the first part, he's resisting the Nazis on the bandstand, but not for anything related to ideology. It's just like, well, they're making the wrong sounds and we got to make the right sounds. And so it's so dim. But it's funny because he also doesn't do the stupid thing, which I was worried about of like, oh, the heart of a child is pure. That we're never worried about that, right? Like there's never a moment where it's like, oh, it's so pure and simple or something.
one of the moments I loved in particular was he was just saying something about how, well, innocence lost can be regained. I mean, how many nice old women were once vicious, petulant infants. It's like,
Well, there is, I mean, in more general, just this is a novel. It's a tendency for novels to have these themes. There is sort of a, you know, God, I was going to say there is sort of a rebirth theme, but he resists it. Like, what can you tell me if you, and it's totally fine to say you have no idea, because I'm not sure I have any idea. Can you tell me about the relationship to Jesus in this book and what
I
it
was
means?
going to bring that
Um,
up in the
like,
same tone of bafflement. It
I don't
needs
know.
to be there.
That's great.
It's important, but it's like, I mean, okay, like the big events are, the first. It's like when he's at the church when he's, I guess, actually the age of a child. Um, and it's like he tries to put the drum on Jesus, and have him play out of a sort of like, I don't know, calling to do that, and then he gets punished for that doing that. Then as an adult, he's like doing it as sort of a joke, like, ha, Jesus, I bet you can't play. And then Jesus proceeds to play every, pop melody there is. Um, with great care, and then tells him that he needs to be, to follow in his footsteps. And then the whole business with the Dusters, little like adolescent gang, and it's how it's like, yeah, I am Jesus, and they take him as Jesus, and then proceed to try to steal and reenact I don't know, the adoration of the shepherds or whatever was going on
Right.
in the church. And it's like,
To the
Jesus,
very end where he goes,
religion's a big deal.
I'm Jesus. Okay, I'm Matzeroth, which is
Yeah,
very interesting.
and it's
Yeah.
like he and
I'm not the son, I'm the father.
yes.
Right? Like that's kind of okay, can I venture like a little bit of a guess?
Yeah, yeah, no, I have some guesses too.
So here's my guess is that it's related to iconography and how Jesus is always encapsulated at certain static moments in his life. Uh, it's the stations of the cross. It's not the river of the cross. Baby Jesus is sort of this image encapsulated in time.
It's, yeah, I know, I see that, like that sort of
Like,
symbolic.
sure, part of it. Let's
No,
get
no, no,
out. Let's
no,
go
no.
deeper.
Yeah, that symbolic quality of,
Yeah.
of Jesus in these different moments in his life, like the way, like, because there's lots of that sort of heavy symbol, like, like when he meets, I forget the name of the guy, but like the last character who's introduced in the book, and it's like he's in a tree, this very thin guy in this apple tree, and it's just like the symbolism of the serpent is very quite
Yeah.
emphasized. Um, it's one of these things. Now, why is it here? It fit. It feel. It's a world that's not sacred anymore. It's a world that's living in a wasteland. It's a world that's values have been utterly trashed in a core way, and like presenting Jesus in this like comical fashion, like that feels relevant of like, yes, the most sacred, the most important things, as it were. It's also kind of a joke. It's also just sort of funny, the whole thing. And I think also just it sort of fits in just also with this general themes of mental illness in a sense, or like the attitude of mental illness, where it's like there's this megalomaniac quality about it, where it's like, yeah, like I'm I'm the center of the world. I'm Jesus Christ. That's how I feel.
Well, it's twofold, right? On the one level, it's yeah, it's like properly psychotic, right? Like he accepts the metaphor of Jesus, but there's no weight. Like there's no like there's some gravitas or unconscious mechanism missing. It's more just like everything is on the surface and it's these images playing around.
The thing is, it's yes and no.
Right.
It's like, of course, the midget that breaks things with his voice is not Jesus, but he also he's very convincingly is in a
Yeah,
different way of like the confidence in his voice, the spontaneity of accepting that.
the way he's able to cathartically release others' tension.
Yeah,
And
it's that there is something that's like I mean just that whole scene in the cathedral when they're like trying to steal the little nativity scene, and it's like he's like posing as Jesus and everyone's kneeling down and doing this like mock uh Christian sacrament. It's like it's also kind of it's funny, it's absurd, but it also feels sincere in a very odd way. Like it carries something of it, of like the intensity of the emotion.
yeah, no,
And
I
of course,
think
and
you're
of course, then he reverses it, like because like the police come in and he just betrays them immediately. Like, oh, I just even though he's like really 20 years old, it's like, well, I then proceeded to act like I was a 3 year old who had been tricked into this by the older kids.
like
Uh,
he did with Jan, where he was like, "Oh, I'm just a child. Don't kill me, Nazis."
and it's so wonderful, just like how reflexively he betrays them.
Yeah, it's
Without
like
even the slightest guilt, not even the slightest care, he does that. It's
it is
beautiful.
sort of like this is I actually don't know. I just so like when I was in San Diego a couple months ago or a month ago, there was this homeless guy who was like soapbox preaching about white nationalism. This is going to go on YouTube, so I'm actually not going to say what he said. This is one of the few things where I actually don't want any part of what I'm saying to be taken out of context. But and like I really thought about the way this guy, who is clearly psychotic, obviously, was speaking, and it's like reality was like happening to him. Like yeah, like he's like preaching and everything, and it means deeply to him in that it means like electricity. Like he's just a conduit saying these things. He heard them, they latched on. He probably doesn't even know what they mean, you know? And so, like, there's that surface level where it's like, okay, so this guy latched on to the classic schizophrenic racist fantasy, which is just a symptom. And there's a little of that surfaceness in this novel where it's like, oh, the eels, and then she died, and then then this other thing happened. I don't know. I just get a surface, not in a good way. I mean in a good way. Like it's very imagey and surfacey. Like you don't feel like you don't feel like Oscar has an unconscious. It's all there. It's all on the surface in a
I
weird
mean,
way.
it's weird.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that's like that's a good contrast you're bringing up, but it's a contrast for me of Oscar is an artist, and so
Yes.
is Gunter Grass. Like there's a sense of like no, like there's a real grappling with feelings while like this poor psychotic on the street that you ran into. I don't I don't know what's going on with him, but like I imagine it's like, yeah, this is a sort of trite repetition of other things he's heard. It strikes him with a certain reality, but it's like it's the worst, most degenerate kind of realism for him. While the things we're getting are like, and they're like,
Oh,
yeah,
it's deep. It's
when
deeper
that guy
for
says
us.
he's Jesus, it doesn't mean anything. When Oscar says he's Jesus, we should listen. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's it. I also think that your point about the author is fantastic. I also think deeply that this is a force for good. Obviously there's certain weird ontological differences in world building, but the values in this book, obviously the narrative is not saying you should betray your friends. It's kind of funny when Oscar does it. It's not saying we should do that. Like it's weirdly, we said this in the first part. I think it's kind of wholesome. I think it's like pretty good values. I don't, in a
No,
weird way,
I
kind of a
do.
self-determination thing with Oscar.
I feel that Grass is a good guy. And I feel Oscar is beyond good and evil. Um, like I can't judge him. It's not a world where you judge people for the things they do. But it's coming from a very sincere emotional place. Like in like a contrast to something we've read is like John Janae. That does not feel like a sincere work in a certain fundamental ways. Like I don't feel Janae's a good guy when I read The Balcony or his other works. There's
Entertaining.
something weird and pretentious. Also, sometimes Eugene O'Neill is not in the ones we read, but in some other works he feels just a little bit pretentious, a little bit try hard, and it's like that's not quite a good emotional place, dear O'Neill. Um, it's so good, O'Neill. I still
Well,
like
yeah, but also
it.
we're talking values. I mean, someone can have quality that exceeds this, but that doesn't necessarily mean we agree with the implicit values of the text.
The thing is,
Like, like I could theoretically write a really great Mein Kampf, but that doesn't mean that it has good values.
well, the thing is I have this like tentative position that all really great art is born from goodness. And when I say goodness, I mean something along the lines of a genuine grappling with life, a real attempt to understand what's happening in the world, not faking it.
So like a kind of a virtue ethic position.
Yeah, yes, something along that way. And like that's how I feel about, I mean, Kafka or Joyce or Sophocles or Shakespeare. It's like these guys are really trying to grapple with the human condition, and I don't know, maybe they have problems in their life, but Jesus Christ, it's life is weird and complicated. It's hard to understand people, and like the reasons why they have the problems they do. Sometimes you can figure it out, but it's hard, especially for someone who's very intelligent. Um, but it's like that's my feeling is like really great literature is only you only really produce it if you're a good person, and when there's something else going on, something else like bad in the human personality, like Aldous Huxley does this more later in his life. Like, yeah, there's something just sort of preachy and toxic about this guy that's like gone wrong. Or Janae, and it's like versus someone like Grass here, it's like, no, this is just the world as he sees it. This is just the way it is, and I feel like, yeah, that's good. Maybe I don't want to be friends with Grass necessarily. It's such a different foreign attitude in so many
I
ways,
feel
but
like you'd like say like open up your hand and you'd be like, what? And he'd hand you a pile of worms or something. You're like, these are good German worms from the North Country or something.
and I would say, well, thank you, Grass.
Thank you. I'm gonna put them right over here. But no, okay, I think so I tend to divorce literature from the life a little more than you do.
Mhm.
I think that you can have a fully autonomous, great work of art. That my buddy Isaac once said this about Celine, and when we were talking about his anti-Semitism, and Isaac was like, well, because after writing a book, he just had that one single brain cell left to be racist. And I think there's something to that. I think that I don't know if I think of that as a sort of fundamental goodness tied to literature. I mean, I think it is. Hold on one sec. Let me give you that. Obviously, it's tied to literature, of course.
Yeah, just not as tightly connected as you as I'm
No,
saying.
I'm willing to accept that it's totally possible that a really good person is just like really stupid. And I'm also really willing to accept that a really bad person can write ethically. I'm willing to accept certain splits, where it's like, huh, that's funny. Like, here's one. Jose Salah, he writes The Hive, which is like this really democratic novel. It's like got 500 characters just out in commerce. and it's kind of a hymn to commerce. It's almost like it's very liberal. And he was a devout fascist, and I just think there's a huge dissonance there, and I can't figure it out.
Yeah, it's I don't understand. Um, I don't understand how cultures sort of create an atmosphere where certain things seem more plausible in a certain way. And I don't know how that works with individuals because, like we can all just name people who just like, I don't know, Heidegger or Celine over there, who like, yeah, like this is something really problematic and wrong in their views, but it's also, I mean, people are weird and complicated. I still am going to judge them because that's the best I have, but it's
Oh
all,
yeah, of course we got to judge the
yeah, you
bad
got to judge them.
So,
I'm
well,
just
and
I'm
if
just saying,
Gunter Grass said, if Gunter Grass just in the meta narrative was like, I don't like Jews, they suck, we'd be like, what the hell?
yes, that would not,
We would judge him but we judge him in part because it'd be inconsistent with the novel. And
yeah,
if it wasn't inconsistent with the novel, I don't think it'd be a thing we'd read. So, where I'm giving you credit here is I do think there is certain virtuous decisions in art. Beyond that, very mysterious.
yeah. That's I'm very happy for dealing with grass and reading this book because it is just such a I mean, it's such a different but also a very familiar attitude. Um it's I love his trash. Like
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's interesting. A lot of people would say that, when we talk about art, we talk about artifice, like art and artifice. You make a copy of a reality, mimesis, whatever you want to say. You know, this is not Germany 1944. This is an artwork, it's a semblance, it's whatever. And so I think people who don't do a lot in art would find it odd that we keep talking about truth and values and the real and authenticity, or all this sort of stuff and virtue in the way I mentioned it. Um, because I think a lot of people, lay listeners, go, "Oh, well, I actually go to escape," and
yeah.
I don't know if they actually do go to escape.
Well, it's interesting the way you put like the escape mentality. Um it reminds me of someone mentioning that I don't know the exact context or phrasing, but it's like it's something along the idea of like if you're being abused, you just end up having you don't escape into your dreams just will reflect the abuse. Um
Oof.
I don't think that's psychological. I don't know how realistic it is psychologically. At least, like in me, my difficult times in life, it's like, yeah, when things are bad, I just have horrific nightmares, and if things are bad enough, the horrific nightmares are actually an escape. Like I will wake up in the morning and be like, oh God, yeah, I was being chased by this other horrific monster, but that was so much more calming and pleasant than this reality I'm dealing with. That has happened in my life.
That's
Uh,
funny.
so okay, but yeah, in terms of, so it's like the world that you live in, you can't cut off from it. Like you can't have this sort of schizophrenic living like that show Severance. I haven't actually watched it. I just know the premise where it's like you go to work and you forget who you are and different things happen. Um,
Oh, that
and
sounds good.
and it's like and it's sort of you don't get that in life, and it's like what you find pleasurable, what you find entertaining, what you find relaxing is informed by everything else going on in your life to varying degrees. Um, and so it's like what you're doing in your normal day, it's like, yeah, that will be reflected in the kind of humor you like and the sort of books you like to read or video games you like to play. Um, you're one person, and John Dewey has a term for this sort of thing, like the continuity of experience, and basically experiences don't ever come in discrete, disparate parts. It's like it's all one continua, and every part informs every earlier part informs the later parts. Um, and I find that to be a really great way of thinking about things on Dewey's part.
Yeah. Sure.
um,
I mean, okay, wait. Can I just, on our way out, let me problematize that really quick.
yeah,
The obvious theoretical problematization to that nice thing you just said was retroactivity in Freud called Nachtraglichkeit, which is that we always tend to narrativize in reverse based on where we're at now. And on one hand, that sounds fine and everything, but on the other hand, like I just happened to get a job at a bookstore, and then like my whole life became literature. But like there's a little bit of a trauma in like, well, yeah, but if I got a job at the university the first time, I never would have written a word. And then that would have been my whole existential existence. And obviously
yeah.
there's a deeper commitment to art in general, but I find it a little traumatic, the enthusiasm of commitment where I go, oh yeah, I'm all in. And then I'm like, yeah, there's like this other path and I would have been all in. And there's a little
No,
dissonance there.
I
It
feel that.
interrupts the continuity. I'll say it that way.
No, no, I'm very much, I get that. And that's happened to me in different parts of my life where
Yeah.
it's like, like there was a period where it's like, oh, I'm going to be a mathematician. And like, I think of like one moment when I was a kid and like, I was the one who like organized this particular little like, this counting problem, like how many different combinations are there of something in like the most clean way. And the teacher turned around and smiled at me and said, "Oh, best job, Ray." And I was very proud of myself. It's like, oh, that's like a founding moment when I'm thinking of myself as I'm going to be a mathematician. A different
Yeah.
time, it's like, oh, like I was thinking, like, oh yeah, I'll be a teacher and that sort of thing, and lecturer. And it's like, I think about a moment when I was a kid and it was like, sort of like pretend teaching to my mother something when I was like 3 or whatever, or 4, and it's like, like I could make that an incident that like centers my life, and it's like, oh, I was thinking of being an engineer or something, like not really, but a moment's like, oh yeah, I could do that. How about like
Yeah.
Legos, like and how much I played with those as a kid, and it's like the present informs your perspective on the past and what you see as being causally significant. And like, well, and it says that's what that's what this horrific thing is about. Um,
Right, right.
like there's something about like, yeah, like we're looking back on he's telling us his past, he's recounting it to us, but it's so horrifically morphed by the things of the present, by the war guilt and the Holocaust, and the Holocaust isn't even mentioned in the book, but it's there. It's there.
Haunts. Yeah. Well, it's sort of mentioned and there's like the night of the Chris there's like Crystal Nacht is
Yeah, yeah.
mentioned.
The anti-Semitism is mentioned, but not.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Not the Holocaust proper. I think my incredibly perverse brain rewrite of this book, if I was to like be like a retelling of Gunter Grass's Tin Drum, which I would never do, of course, but if I was, like what I would do is that I would invert the ritornellos and all the refrains when they come back, they add in the book they often add significance or change slightly. In the world I would like, I want a refrain to come back and mean the opposite and really fuck with the subject. That would be what I want to try to do. Is you have something come back from childhood and you find out you're in a different position and then that refrain just God, it's awful.
Yeah,
And it almost happens in the book actually, but they mainly retain their emotional significance.
yeah. I'm. Oh Lord, I'm just trying to think. I mean, like that feels like it's bringing up something near to me. That feels like relevant to me. It was I guess the closest thing. Okay, this I don't think this is isn't actually what you're doing there. It's something different, but it's I'll throw it out here anyway, out of hopelessness. Um, I've had very wildly changing views of Atlas Shrugged over the last like year of my life, going from like, oh, this is a great book,
Yeah.
to like, this is propaganda, this is poisonous. Like that's how much I've shifted over time. And I was reading for the first time like an original New York Times review of Atlas Shrugged and what they had to say, and well, there's a complex of feelings there. But one thing is they quoted the book. They quoted the last lines of the book, and I vaguely remembered them. And I remembered reading them and feeling, oh, this is good.
Mhm.
And this time I was rereading the quote and like, that's bad. They misquoted that, right? So I opened it up. I opened it up just to make sure, like, no, it is that bad, right? They did have
Ugh.
that poorly. Rand's not that good. And it's
I
like,
would say I would say that does hint on a core fundamental experience because now the object is sort of disembodied from itself. You have this ideal past of the object where it was good and rosy, which is blocked now, but you still remember when you loved it.
yeah, and it was it was funny of a different play on that is like our friend Matt, he we were talking about Rand, and at one point he quotes something from her more or less verbatim, and and he was like, oh, she said something like that, like, well, no, Matt, like it's literally like that is her phrase for it, and he's like, that isn't just some clumsy paraphrase. She actually used those specific words, and it was like, yeah, man, she really did. And it hurt both of us. um
Yeah. Well, yeah. I don't really know. I don't know. I mean, what's kind of funny is the I one last thing before we leave on Gunter Grass and this book because I know we're winding down, but can we do some like last looks talk?
yeah, of course. It's such a massive work filled with so many things,
It was
like,
very rich and it's always continuous. It's not like you every page. One of the things I think that makes Gunter Grass a great writer is that every page sounds like Gunter Grass, and yet there's still variety. So that's really cool. I also think that I felt this weight on this book from my own brain saying this is a you novel, Chris. You would love this novel. And I was like, shut up, you don't know what I like. And I don't know why. I don't know why I had that dissonance. Whereas like he's in the same literary world as Malaparte in this sense, and oh, so many writers I love. Like I love the magical realism. I love the fantastic. I love fairy tales. I like how this just reads like Grimm's fairy tales in a weird way. I love that. I'm in debt to fairy tales, and yet for some reason, this is where I'm getting to. It wasn't my favorite novel. And I feel kind of bad about that. I don't know why. Like theoretically, this should be like my number one novel of all time. And I didn't have that experience.
yeah, it's I remember starting to read this book and
Yeah.
being like, oh yeah, this is great, I'm at home with this. And there were just too many sort of things that weren't quite me, that didn't work for me just as an individual. Like I see how they work for Grass, but it's like, I don't know, the drumming, I wasn't musical growing up. I the I always find like this particular way, the because it's a very sexual book, and it's always kind of gross. And it's like, I don't know, just like, she's got like this weird fizz drift stuff or whatever, and you put the powder in her hand and you spit on it, and this causes her to have feelings.
I would say this, it's a sexual novel in the organism sense. Biologically,
Yes,
it is in no way
yes,
erotic at all at any
yes.
point.
Yeah,
There's nothing.
it's erotic in the way that a pile of dung beetles is erotic. Um,
Yeah, it's very biologically correct.
um,
Like, but uh that's not how human sexuality works.
yeah, so it was uncomfortable, and I feel like a native German would get a lot more out of this than me. Um, it just feels German somehow. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
but it's something that, especially like the later sections, when everything starts to sort of come back around in important ways, and these, you're just overwhelmed by the memories. Uh, like that's when the book really kind of comes to light. That's when it becomes something really brilliant and unforgettable. Um,
Yeah, I think the ending was fantastic. I think that torrent of human existence just falling into place. Um, I have trouble with vignette style writing. I love it on one hand. I think in one way I like Kaput a little more is that he has entire chapters where he's like telling stories to this Dutch princess and they're horrible from the war. But then other parts, like the ending is sort of he's caught up in a mass of refugees retreating to the caves. And it feels like the ending of the world is coinciding with the ending of the novel. And I think there are points in the middle where this book where I lose the meta narrative. I really didn't like it when he went on tour with Bebra.
yeah,
I
that
really didn't like that.
that was the weakest part of the novel by far. I'm glad
I
you brought
was
that up.
I hated that. I was just like, what are you doing? Can we get on? We just had this huge it just keeps going. And then at the end I never felt that. In the last third of the book I was enraptured again and everything was fantastic. But when he was on tour, I was just like, oh my God.
The only part of that I really liked was the is that they're in one of these little like pill boxes,
Yeah.
and is describing the construction, how it's like every single one has a puppy in it. Uh, and how there's this one sort of modern art, or just artist among them, who makes little like vague structurings inside of like the cement boxes that are being formed, and how he fantasizes about how people in the 25th century will talk about how the period between the First and Seventh World Wars was totally devoid of art, except for this one artist who plied his trade on the pillboxes of.
Yeah.
He was a lone genius in that impoverished age, and it was like I just love the megalomania. I love that image. It was so beautiful and sincere. I don't know why I'm calling it sincere, but I love it. Um,
Well, I mean, the whole thing was sincere. That's the problem, is it's very weird. And so it's like the sincerity of its weirdness is never at stake. The distance is maybe at stake. So, yeah, I mean, are there any other passages you want to hit on? I mean, I think we got I think actually some of the theory we were doing on this book is pretty good. I mean, I was like, yeah, like I think it's a pretty deep book. I think it's worthy of a lot of philosophy and thinking, and I think obviously we scratched the surface, but I think some of the big ways it hits me I was able to actually say, which is often rare.
yeah, I was concerned going into this conversation that, like, what do we say about this object? It's And I'm feeling now like, okay, no, I've aligned my emotions. It all makes more sense.
Right, because it still had some consistencies. And that's what's important is the worldview, the way objects work, the slime of it, the gross. Like there's a lot of consistent types of imagery found in the novel, and consistent the way. And again, I keep saying it, but the ontology of the novel is, yeah, it's consistent,
Yeah,
strange but consistent.
yeah. One thing about it, by the way, that I like about this kind of novel structure,
Mhm.
as opposed to like a more coherent, straightforward plot, is it really just feels like, why did the artist put this here? Because he felt like it. Because I mean, but I mean that in a very deep, like serious sense of this particular thing about the eels, or that about the pillbox, or this other thing about, I don't know, the woman's finger. It's like he felt that with his whole soul when he was writing that. It needs
Yes.
to be there. It is him. It's more him than some long drawn out and complicated bit of plot plumbing that a 19th century author might do, which can be good, which can be excellent. But it's like it just breathes life. It's like this is coming from his soul, not from any sort of abstraction he's trying to impose on the materials.
No, no. I mean, the images are coming to him, and he's writing them down, sent from beyond. I mean, well, and that's why, like, so when I first started, I was like, look, I don't want to do what I do with a lot of other authors here, because I don't think this novel has a coherent, like, classically psychoanalytic interpretation that would make either of us happy in the slightest. Whereas Balzac, I'm like, oh yeah, like it's all about, desire and these things here, and you can kind of point to some really concrete interpretations very clearly. The why here is at stake because who fucking knows? I don't know. Just like that's what
It's
makes it
about grass. That's
about graph. But isn't that the joy of fairy tales? You read a good fairy tale, you read a bad one and you're like, it's trying to tell me a message. You read a good one and you're like, wow, the ravens plucked out Cinderella's sister's eyes, and that was awesome. And they did that. And that's a cool image, I guess,
why is it there? Because it should be. Um,
because it was nice to see them hurt. I don't know. And I don't, yeah, like there's no, and I think beyond that, obviously, what you don't want to do is you don't want to go beyond. You just want to go deeper and just kind of connect things, make connections, and that's the fun of it. Otherwise, it ruins the fun of a delightful novel. Um, and it's not that that's the only thing. Obviously, there was a ton more that we talked about. The distance from history, the inclusion of history, you know, that's someone's master's thesis. How history is dealt with in Gunter Grass's Tin Drum.
yeah, that might be an interesting
In
thing.
your long book.
Yeah,
I had to write it because it's too much research and I'd have to read it again, and I don't actually want to do that. But yeah, like you don't want to gild the lily with a book like this. Whereas with De Benedetto, can I just say like I love De Benedetto. They recently translated a new one of his works, which I bought. It's really good. Um, I think Gunter Grass is farther reaching than him. I like him, but I think he's like a prince of minor writers.
yeah, that basically precisely describes how I feel about De Benedetto. He's great. He's fun. But it's Grass is a more serious writer.
Because he's dealing with, in the Hegelian sense, world historical, even if it's also his whimsy, we're still in this world
I
historical
mean,
thing.
it's
Right.
something universal in that it's
Yeah.
about like living in a world that's patently absurd and unprocessable. Like that's like this is when the trauma
Yeah.
causes you to be like this ironic, detached, childlike, because being childlike because you refuse to engage with the world of adults and their woodenness. Um,
Well, yeah. I mean, I would. I mean, just like you said, ironic before. I don't think anything about Oscar is ironic. I think he's the op. I think he's like the most.
No, he's very sincere. It's sincere
No,
in a sense.
I think that Gunter Grass might have some of that irony, but
Yeah,
not
yeah,
Oscar.
yeah. He's not. Yeah, there's however we want to put it. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
but it's yeah, it's a magnificent work, and yeah, I'm really happy we finally got through it after so much delay.
My apologies. Next time I am
It was
right
me
on
too. It
time.
was me too, man. It was me too. I had to push back a couple of times there also. But
Well,
next one will be short, and we'll get back on what exactly whatever the hell it'll be.
some weird Norwegian dude.
Hopefully. Um,
Thanks so much, Ray. Really a joyful time, though. I know it took
okay.
us a while, but it was
This
worth
was
doing the
this
whole
was
book.
great, Chris. All right. Well, see you soon. All right.
See you
Bye.
soon. Bye.